Let's move on over to the Oregon Ducks. Bo Nix had a Heisman level campaign last year, and I don't believe that he's a fluke. That was one question that we've gotten this offseason. Do we believe that Bo Nix can keep it going this year? And I absolutely think that he can. It seems like Dan Lanning has a lot of momentum as well. He got a nice little extension this offseason. And so for the Oregon Ducks, 10-3 a season ago, they obviously get blown out against Georgia in the opener. And that called into question their toughness, Bo Nix's ability to deliver the football accurately, to deliver it under pressure. And he answered those questions down the stretch, beating Arizona, beating UCLA. They did lose to Washington, an absolute classic of a game, but then they knock off Utah 20-17. If they don't lose in the Platypus Cup or whatever they're calling it this year, Oregon has a real chance at being in the Pac-12 championship game, right? And contending for the New Year's Six bowl game. Instead, they play a classic against North Carolina in the Holiday Bowl, and they finish 10-3. For me, the passing attack is going to be the drum that beats all year for Oregon. If there's a weakness, it's once again the offensive line. They need the interior to step up and replace a couple of starters. Now, maybe Junior Anilou from Texas helps them do that. But this was the sixth best offense overall last season. First in sacks allowed as well. So they protected Bo Nix. They let him throw the ball down the field to whoever he could find. This year's wide receiver core is going to look like Troy Franklin. Tez Johnson comes in from Troy. Gary Bryant Jr. comes over from USC. And then there's Trayshawn Holden coming over from Alabama. He's a little bit of a wild card, but it's a very, very talented unit. Not to mention they can run the ball. Bucky Irving, Noah Whittington, almost 2,000 yards combined last season. The offense should be as electric as ever. On the defense, it's kind of transfer you for the Ducks. You have Kyrie Jackson, who comes over from Alabama, Nico Reed, who comes over from Colorado at cornerback. At safety, you have Tasheem Johnson from Ole Miss, Evan Williams from Fresno State. Could be, if they play up to the level that they have in seasons past, could be the best safety duo in the Pac 12. At linebacker, you've got Justin Jacobs from Iowa. You've got Connor Soule from Arizona State. And then, oh, by the way, Jordan Birch, a former five-star, transfers over from South Carolina on the edge. So a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts. Oregon, and we can talk about them in context of their schedule. It's a comfy start over the first 5 weeks, but then the back half of the schedule is really, really tough. With all those transfers, are you worried that Oregon maybe stumbles late in the season?
I definitely think there's a possibility that that happens. I think the middle of their schedule is more where I'm nervous. I think there's some tougher games right there. I think at Washington, at Utah, those are the two that I have them losing. Again, we talked about it off the top. I do think they can beat USC at home, but I do think, yeah, that at Washington, at Utah, those are two really tough games, meat of the schedule. I know that you're coming off a bye week when you're doing Washington. I think Washington, we just said, has the same situation.
They
So
do. Mhm.
it's both teams coming off it on the road. Washington got them last year. I'm kind of inclined to think they'll do it again. But I do have the Oregon Ducks going 10-2 this year, barely going over on their win total. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I said it last year. I think this was the first episode that we ever recorded. I think Dan Lanning is a really, really good coach. And I think he's going to have some really good success in his second year, especially when you consider the fact that he's a defensive minded head coach. And I think that they're going to play a lot better on defense and kind of take some steps in that way. Again, kind of just looking at some of their stats. Let me pull those real quick. Some of their stats from last year, if you look on the defensive side, not always terrible, but some really bad thing, especially in the situational things. The third down percentage, 123rd. The sacks, 123rd. Better in the red zone, 22nd. That was better, but a lot of places where they can improve, and that seems, if it's a situational thing, it seems to be more of a scheme thing. And I could be wrong about that. It could just be bad luck or just bad pieces or whatever. But it seems to me that a little bit more time with scheme should help those stats improve, should help those numbers improve a little bit. I think that Bo Nix is going to have an amazing sort of last year doing this and kind of riding off a little bit with his revived career up in Oregon. But yeah, I think it's a tough schedule. It's almost the same thing I was saying for Washington. When you look at the schedule, I just can't justify that they're going to win all of those tough games. I can't justify saying they're going to win all of them. I think that they win a few of them. I think that they beat USC. I think that they will win that last game of the season against Oregon State. But yeah, I can't say that they're going to beat Washington and Utah on the road. And, a tricky Washington State game between the two of them doesn't let them really, put their hands down and take a rest. So I think 10-2 is what you're looking at for the Ducks. But kind of like what we've been saying with a lot of this is a 1B team. So I could see a real path for Oregon catching fire, Bo Nix's experience.
Sure.
If you look at their losses last year, they lost by, ignore Georgia for a second. That's a different thing. But their losses are by what? A combined 7 points at the end of last season. So in conference, you find 7 more points or 8 more points, and you can go out and be undefeated in your conference. I like the way that looks. And so, yeah, I think that just being a little optimistic for the Ducks for a second, you don't need that much more improvement to take that step. Yeah, it's a Pac-12 thing. This is what the Pac-12 does, right? It's just the name of the Pac-12 game is nobody can have nice things. Nobody can just be that number one team by a long shot.
Yeah.
And when you think that you have it all figured out, that's when you lose that random game to Arizona State. And it could be on the table again for Oregon, where they're just cruising and rocking and rolling, and maybe they get by a couple of teams, and then it's just going to be Arizona State at the end of the season, sleeping right after USC, and they're gonna drop a stupid game on a last-second field goal.
Well, and as we get down, we got Oregon State, UCLA to talk about. Washington State's going to be fun. We've talked about Colorado. I think the Arizona schools are potential landmines waiting to happen. I don't think that much of Cal or Stanford, and that'll be kind of reflected in the standings.
Right.
But even Arizona and Arizona State, who I have really struggling to get to bowl games, I think it's honestly going to be a product of the schedule, not a product of, hey, this team sucks, they're only a 4-win team. It's like, I think you're a decent team. I think you're on the road to being bowl eligible, but like you're a half team right now, right? And in that offense, in any given situation, like Arizona State did last year, like Arizona has done in the past, you pick a random week where they put up 55 and you can knock off a UCLA, you can knock off an Oregon. But then the majority of the time, your defense is going to give up 40 to 45, right?
Yep.
And that's how you're going to end up losing games. So we'll get there. But it is very hard as we continue down this schedule. It's very hard to predict where these teams end up because it feels like there's a landmine waiting basically on a week-to-week basis.
What I will say is, of all the teams that I don't have in the championship game, right, because you got your championship game teams and you got the other ones that are just really, really good, I think I believe in Oregon the most to take that step and make it to the championship game, just because I think I trust Dan Lanning as a coach, and I think that I trust Bo Nix, and I never would have thought I would have said this at the beginning of last season, but I think I trust Bo Nix at this point in his career to just not make the mistakes, to just play the mature game of football, let the game come to him, and not try to force something. I could be totally wrong about that. Again, right? Like, we could see old Bo Nix come right back and we all look stupid. But I just don't think that that's going to happen at this stage of his career. I think if there's going to be a team that jumps up out of nowhere to take that step, I think it's Oregon.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. The Ducks should be a lot of fun to watch this season.
Gracious, how about that?